So today's topic is on how federal agencies can exceed their women-owned small business goals in just 12 months. And I'll get to that topic in a second, but I wanted to say why I'm doing this. My training is always for small businesses. I'm always teaching small businesses. We have government buyers come into the training. We have PTAC and related type people like that coming into the training. We have large businesses coming into the training. But the audience, the people I'm trying to reach, you, are the small businesses that are out there serving the federal market. And so today we chose this topic because we're always trying to tell smalls what you can do to take responsibility to be able to get more sales. And today I just want to reverse it a little bit and say, hey, agencies, here's what you can do to achieve what you want as well. So let me dive into that topic. Okay, today's topic we're going to talk about is how federal agencies can exceed their women-owned small business goals in just 12 months. If you want your agency to exceed the women-owned small business goals, as well as those of HubZone, SDVO, 8A, or Total Small Business, it's a pretty straightforward process for you, right? Many of the agencies struggle to reach a 5% goal in that women-owned small business area, and that's just wrong. I think it's wrong. I know you think it's wrong, and I know that the government thinks it wrong. No one wants to hold back women-owned small businesses from the success that they envision for themselves as small business owners, right? Congress, agencies, contracting officers, industry, we all want to see agencies exceed the 5% goal that SBA has set, right, for the federal agencies out there. Nobody wants to hold down women-owned small businesses, right? There are a lot of reasons people might put out there for why this is happening, why agencies aren't hitting their women-owned small business goals. For me, I say the reason that agencies are struggling to award 5% of the federal contract dollars to women-owned small businesses is because they don't have a clear, easy to follow process that is going to deliver those results, hit that goal that they've set, right? In late 2017, I set out to define that process for the HubZone small businesses when I realized they weren't hitting their goal at all. And within one fiscal year, we helped HubZone firms win $3 billion more in set-aside contracts, right? At the same time, we increased performance on goal. I'm talking about the goal today. We increased performance against goal by 24%. That was a huge success. It was massive. But it was just me, my money, and my team, and all the HubZone companies that we brought together and who took responsibility for their own success, right? And the reason I say that is because by following the same process, agencies can increase the percentage of contract dollars awarded to small businesses and to qualified women-owned small businesses, right? I'm never saying to unqualified or not procurement-ready firms, but there are so many women-owned small businesses that are qualified, and agencies can hit that goal if they follow a similar process that I've defined over the last 5 years. Exceeding agency women-owned small business goals, it's not a secret. It's just a process. All right, if you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my live federal sales training where I teach tips for success in the federal market. Like I said, usually I teach small businesses how to get into agencies. Today, I want to talk to agencies about how you can hit the goals that you have. For those of you who are small businesses on here, it's really important for you to pay attention to what I'm teaching because you want to be where I'm trying to get the agencies to look, right? And perhaps you can also take this training and go share it with them. I spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal market. And since 2018, when I started the HubZone Chamber that then became the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. If you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, YouTube, do me a favor, connect and do that right now so that you can keep tracking on really good information that I put out there. Yesterday, I put out this huge strategic plan. It was like 140 pages or something. Not strategic plan, but a industry briefing. And in there was many people's names, a lot of email addresses and perhaps phone numbers, and 11 huge opportunities that might fit into your space. Before we get started, if you haven't done so already, put in your company name and your core competency into the chat. Let buyers know who you are. In fact, on this training, I'm going to push the replay out to many, many federal buyers that I know, certainly all the leaders in the small business community who have responsibility for hitting those goals. And so when they come in to watch this, they will see the replay of the chat along with the replay of the video. So make sure you're putting that in there. Finally, I just want to say thank you to the sustaining members of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce. Without you, none of this training could be possible. We don't take money from the government. We don't take money from large primes. It's sustaining members like you who make this possible. Okay, so I wanted to go through three main points, if you will, on today's training about how agencies can exceed the women-owned small business goal in 12 months. And so I want to first start with the top challenges that agencies face. And I want to begin to talk about this. Again, as I'm talking about the challenges agencies face, and I'm looking to see, how they resonate with what I'm saying, as a small business, pay attention to these, because even if it's a perception and it's not reality, there's a line out there that says perception is reality. And so the first challenge, for example, is that small businesses are perceived risky within an agency. Some agencies, that is much more true in reality, and other agencies, it's less so, right? But for the general average agency out there, small businesses compared to large businesses are perceived risky. They're perceived as lacking any of the necessary advanced skills that maybe an agency needs to meet the requirements to address the mission. Think subject matter experts, right? A large prime might have retired people coming out of the military, a whole bunch of PhDs, all these things. And sometimes agencies look at smalls thinking that same thing. But the reality is, when I did the Hub Zone push back in 2017, 2018, we actually were pointing out that there was 2 Hub Zone firms that were literally nuclear scientists, right? They built nuclear, or they worked on nuclear plants. They were just small businesses, but they were still subject matter experts. And so we need to correct this perception that, we don't have that skill set, or that smalls don't. And this is normal, right? Until you begin to have better communication with program offices and industry, they might not know that. There's a perception that small businesses just lack the past performance, the experience necessary to be able to run this contract of mine, right? And so if you're an agency and you've got another contract coming out and it's $10 million or $100 million, you might think smalls don't have the experience, but they do. And women-owned small businesses do. I showed a training earlier this month where I showed women-owned small businesses winning $25 million a year contracts, $100 million contracts. When I did the Hub Zone thing, we helped Hub Zone firms win a $200 million set aside. So there are a lot of small businesses, women-owned small businesses included, that do have the past performance. And the last point on the small businesses are perceived risky, and one of the reasons people might do it is think that there's no organizational maturity in a small business like in a large. But that just isn't the case either. We small businesses go through organizational maturity, right? When we start, our accounting is done in a spreadsheet, and then it's done in like QuickBooks, and then it's done in some advanced tool. When we start, we have the money that's in our bank account, and then we might have some credit cards, and then we start having some lines of credit and loans, and we begin to have equity. We smalls obviously need to communicate this to agencies, but agencies need to understand that this challenge that you face where you think maybe smalls can't do it, it's not coming from the facts. It generally is coming from the larges communicating that down. And that's something we have to correct. And we'll talk about how in a minute. The second big challenge that I see agencies facing on why they're not hitting their goals is that small businesses aren't showing up, right? So the first problem is a perception that needs to be corrected on the agency side. And the second one is on the small business side. Agencies are not hitting their goals because small businesses aren't showing up when the buyer needs them to, right? Whether it's at RFI or sources sought, there's a low response rate or no response rate. We'll talk about later, and maybe I'll expand in a different session about what you can do about these things. But a challenge the government has is when they're doing sources sought and market research, they're looking for companies to be able to show up, and if not a sufficient number of women-owned small businesses show up, then they don't feel confident moving it forward, right? And it's one of the reasons the numbers stay low. And so that low response rate from women-owned small businesses. Another example in the not showing up part is this perception that smalls can't do the work. So this is a tough one for me because agencies put too much responsibility, I think, on small businesses during the sources sought that they never do for the largest, right? the largest, maybe they do it on $1 billion contract. They do a little bit of response, but usually nothing at all. But the smalls, we're put through a lot of extra effort. And so the perception is that smalls can't do the work. And the reason for that is what we said earlier, is that there's a lack of information being shared about smalls actually winning contracts and doing the very work that agencies need in order to execute their mission. And then this other problem related to smalls not showing up, and it generally stems from the sources sought, but there's this perception by contracting officers that women-owned small businesses just aren't going to show up at the RFP. Well, why would I think that? I think that because they didn't show up to the sources sought, and they either can't do the work because they didn't respond. I mean, because they're not responding, I'm thinking they can't do the work, right? If they could do the work, they would tell me they could do the work. But because there's a low response rate, because we put too much burden on the smalls, there's a low response rate, which gives us the perception either that they can't do the work and that's why they're not responding, or they're not interested in participating in this opportunity, and so they won't show up at the RFP. But neither one of them could be the truth, right? If somebody's not responding, it could be because they missed it, because the government actually doesn't do that good of a job making sure industry hears about opportunities. It could be because, smalls have been kind of burdened for a long time on the amount of work they have to do to respond to a sources sought. Not even an RFI, right? But a sources sought is almost like mini proposals for some agencies. And so having to take a look at that is really important. And the third final challenge I just want to mention that agencies face as it relates to not hitting your women-owned small business goal is that you're spending time with the wrong people, the wrong small businesses. I don't believe at all that you should be spending time with every small business that reaches out to you. It's a waste of time. There's better ways to handle that, still serve the industry, serve the community, but not actually spend an hour talking to somebody. So one example of the wrong type of person or company to be talking to is talking to somebody who has no chance of supporting the agency's mission. They have no chance of winning that prime contract, right? If you're talking to somebody like that, that means you're not talking to a company that could prime that contract, and they want to learn more information. They want to get your help to get into the program office to talk. They want to participate in active market research, not just response to forecast type things. And so we're spending time with companies that currently are not at the level to be able to win prime contracts. And I'll talk about this in a minute, but they should be directed somewhere that makes more sense for them so that you can spend more time with the small businesses who have what you need in order to be winning the prime contract. And so just reiterating that with another term, we call it procurement ready, right? A lot of us in the industry, is this small business procurement ready? And some people talk about procurement ready being in SAM, and I don't say that's procurement ready, right? That's just breathing type thing. Procurement ready means that they have the skills that match the requirements that you have. They can serve your mission. They have the past performance that can deliver on that contract, right? They have that organizational maturity. And it doesn't have to be overly complicated, right? But if it requires a clearance, they have a clearance, things like that. Those are procurement ready. And so every minute that we're spending time with the wrong people, we're limiting the time we could be spending with vendors that really will serve the mission. And by not focusing on these, what I call the wrong people at the moment, are just not procurement ready, that's not a bad thing. We should redirect them in a place where we can guide them towards being procurement ready. And so let me go on to the next slide, which is my recommendations for you. I didn't want to overly complicate my recommendations today. I've been doing this 5 years. And I'm happy to talk to agencies about what to do, but I have 3 recommendations that I'm just going to mention all 3 of them, and then I'm going to go into them in a second here. But 3 recommendations for agencies on how to exceed your women-owned small business goals. First one is proactively build your supplier base of women-owned small businesses. The second one is implement an agile approach to industry engagement. And the third one, maximize the time spent with procurement-ready small businesses. So those 3, proactively build your supplier base, implement an agile approach to industry engagement, and maximize the time spent with procurement-ready small businesses. So let me talk about what those mean. The first one, you can automatically infer and assume that when I say proactively build your supplier base, I mean don't sit around and wait for it to happen. Don't reactively build your supplier base. Whoever's knocking on your door. You go to a matchmaking event. There's people there. I mean proactively get out there. And so an example is 3 examples I want to give into how you can proactively build your supplier base. First thing is in FPDS, if I go in there, and I teach this to small businesses all the time, if you're looking to subcontract, go into FPDS, find out who's winning, reach out to them, and you can start working with them. Well, agencies can do that same thing. Go into FPDS, find out who's winning, and invite them to become part of your supplier base. If you have a supplier portal, for example, register in there, and I'll talk about that in a second. But FPDS, you can find the winners in a very small amount of time. You can find the winners and begin to reach out to them. And you can begin to do your own research and go, wow, you know what? A minute ago, I thought women-owned small businesses couldn't do contracts over $20 million. They just handle smaller ones. But no, look at all these firms who are handling contracts that are well north of $50 million, right? But if you go in there, you're proactively doing it. Yes, the small businesses should come knocking on your door if they want to work with you. But if you're going to be one of those agencies within the federal government complaining about how you can't hit the numbers, and President Biden and the administration is really pushing for these numbers to go up, well, you could also proactively do that by reaching out and finding the people already winning contracts, because there's a good chance you might like them for some of your future requirements. The second tip in here is, as it relates to proactively building your supplier base, is think about DSBS, the Dynamic Small Business Search, #1 market research tool out there. As you know, there's 9,000 women-owned small business firms in there, SBA certified women-owned small businesses, right? There's 85,000 self-certified, but 9,000 SBA certified. And so when you think about that, you can reach out through DSBS and begin to proactively bring these people in, not just during market research on a single opportunity, but actually reach out to many of them and bring them in. And I'll talk in a minute about how do you engage with them, but reach out to these businesses and don't wait for them to come knocking on your door. This goes to the last point I wanted to mention about building your supplier base is I talked a second ago about supplier portals. And the supplier portal, if people don't know what they are, who are watching, DSBS, the Dynamic Small Business Search with SAM, that's the #1 supplier portal for the federal government. That's where we register if we want to sell to the federal government. So that's the #1 supplier portal, right? #1 market research tool. But many agencies have their own. HHS does, Department of Education does, Navy has several. We have a whole supplier portal that you can go download, supplier portal directory that you can download from our website, www.govconchamber.com. Go there and you can download a free directory of those portals. And my point to you, though, as an agency is, how is your agency managing your own internal supplier base, right? There's this idea that you look to your incumbents and then you maybe look somewhere else. Do you have your own supplier portal? If you have your own supplier portal, are you making sure that one is populated, right? I would encourage you to use DSBS and not have it. But I want to give you an example of the very most populated agency supplier portal and how poor the performance is and how easy it is to proactively build your supplier base. HHS has a supplier portal, many of them out there, but they have the one that is the most populated. And of those 9,000 women-owned small business firms, only 30% of them are registered with HHS in there as wanting to do business. But I'd be willing to bet my weekly paycheck that I could talk to 90% of the women-owned small businesses, and they would say, if I could get a contract with HHS, I would love to get a contract with HHS, supporting them, doing what I do, right? And so most small businesses are unaware of things like this supplier portal. And if you proactively build your supplier base, then you're going to go out there and talk to them and invite them in and get them to join you the same way I go out and I try to get small businesses to join the chamber or agencies to come in and talk with us. So that's the first one, proactively build your supplier base. The second thing I wanted to recommend is for you to implement an agile over waterfall approach to industry engagement. Right now, most of the federal government still operates in a waterfall model. And if basically what waterfall means to me in this case is big, huge projects or initiatives of engaging industry and really an old school approach, like 20 years old type thing. And so I could have called it a modern one, but I like agile because you want to move on a dime because your missions are moving on a dime. The priorities of the federal agencies are moving on a dime. So your engagement with industry should be as agile as you want the small businesses to be, as flexible as you want the small businesses. And so one recommendation, for example, is go from a very large event to weekly briefings. Crane, Indiana is a naval installation. And they know I love them, so I'm going to use them as an example, but I'm going to say what they're doing I'd love to see change. They do this huge event where it's a small business event, and it's packed with a lot of good information, but it's basically one day, and it's packed, and it's a lot of effort on their behalf. And then if you missed it as an industry, then perhaps you're going to miss it. You're never going to see it. What I'm encouraging you to do, let's use Crane as an example, right, is go from one large event to weekly events. And that might seem like a lot, but it really is not. You're working 40 hours a week, right? Spend one of those hours having an industry event. I do this every single day. This live thing I'm doing, it's 30 minutes. I would recommend yours is 60 minutes, and I can talk later about a framework, but you do a 60-minute thing. That means you show up. At most, you're spending 2 hours investing tops for you as a person organizing it in there, and the rest of us can help you get it done or things like that. But you have this chance of reaching hundreds of small businesses every single week. You have this chance of staying in front of the supplier base over and over again, educating the supplier base, beginning to make more and more of the non-procurement ready small businesses procurement ready by giving them guidance on how to work with Crane, et cetera. So that's one tip on how to go to agile from a waterfall approach is come down from these huge annual events that are on location, for example, and do a ton of virtual events. And I recommend weekly live events. Okay, another one that you can do to engage industry is host 30-minute set-aside calls. And I'm going to talk about this very briefly. I have a whole nother, I can come in and talk to you, or I have a whole nother training on it. But a set-aside call is basically like a pre-industry day. Industry day events typically are around a big opportunity or an opportunity. What I'm recommending, and what I did a ton of, is set-aside calls. You take an opportunity, or in your case, a requirement, and you sit there and host a quick meeting, 30 minutes. Anybody's interested, come in, ask any questions you want. And you make that recording available to anybody instantly, right? When you do this, you're encouraging industry to learn a little bit more about it, see that the response is not that big of a deal, and see if they can align their core competency to your requirements. You're encouraging more women-owned small businesses to respond to opportunities. I did 400 of these for the HubZone thing. You don't have to do near as many, but if you start doing some, then this will move forward the needle on engaging industry. And the last one on an agile approach is just create a social selling campaign. Right now, the best way to engage with industry is through social selling, right? LinkedIn is one of the best ways, but you can also use YouTube, your website, whatever, but making a concerted effort, not to brand and market, but to inform. The whole point of this is how do you train industry? How do you engage with industry, right? Not how do you brand and market. And so if you follow a social media approach, you can do something similar to what I do, where I put out strategic plans, for example. I take your industry document and put it out. If I can find a commander of some office who's talking about that, I'll put that video out. You can do things like that by creating a social marketing plan that just goes through the year. And again, the effort is not really anywhere near the rewards that will come in from it. The third tip, and the last one I want to just push here, is maximize the time you spend with procurement-ready small businesses. And one of the ways you can do this is create a vetting process. Pretty much any small business can call somebody and they're in, but there's so many small businesses who aren't in the government yet, who aren't making money yet, or who haven't really gone beyond any kind of subcontracting, for example. Well, those people should be guided down this path of, hey, why don't you team? Not enough agencies teach small businesses how to work with them, right? They do some of these training briefings or whatever, but it's not helping because you keep getting calls from people who can't actually be a prime contractor. Well, if they can't be a prime contractor, then it's really not your job to talk with them. Yes, you can, and you're nice, and I get that, but you should send them to on-demand training, things like that. That way you can increase the time that you're spending with the person who is coming from a company that could win the prime contract. And so the vetting process is ask a series of questions. Are you making any money? Are you in SAM yet? Are you here? If not, here, go over here first. I would absolutely love to talk with you once you go through this cycle, right? And a vetting process is you're just automating the process before you talk to somebody. That way, when you talk to them, you're going to be able to help the small business, and you're likely going to be able to bring a supplier in that can help with the mission and the requirements that are there. Create a living, robust, on-demand training session. That's the one I was looking at. And then remember, you too, I said this at the beginning for small businesses, remember that you're a $10,000 asset to your agency. If you remember that, then you're not going to spend those $10,000 hours with companies that have no chance of winning and really aren't going to be able to help your agency. You want to guide those companies to go talk with smalls and larges who are priming already, learn from them, then come to us, kind of thing. So I'm blowing through really fast on it. I have a lot of kind of activity that I wanted to discuss with you, and I want to show you this one quick slide, and I'll wrap up because I always like to keep to the time. Slideshow. Okay, this one slide, this way you can read most of it, but I can just show. What I'm trying to show here on this one slide is that me, with my resources, and and now with our sustaining members, but even that's a low commitment on people's behalf. What we have been able to do is just incredible. But imagine what you could do with agency resources, right? We get on average 2 million views or engagements, et cetera, on our trainings, on our content every 12 months, right? So every 3 months, we're doing about 500,000 views. And that's only increasing as we continue to get out there. But we don't nearly have the resources you have at an agency. And so I would highly recommend you begin to think about some of these actions that we've done, beginning to implement them yourself. If you can, and if you do this, you will quickly find that you're able to exceed the goals that you have. Okay, so let me just wrap up. If you want your agency to exceed that woman-owned small business goal, as well as those of HubZone, SVO, and 8A Total Smalls, then just remember, proactively build your supplier base, implement an agile approach to industry engagement, and then maximize the time you spend with procurement-ready small businesses. I guarantee you, if you do these, if you follow these tips, you're going to exceed your goal in 12 months. I'd love to talk with you at an agency if you're interested in how I can share more information with you or how I can help you get this done. Reach out to me directly if you're interested. And remember, for industry and government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.